A coworker sabotages another for a promotion, but karma gets him fired instead. The email arrived at 6:03 a.m., one sentence long. You should watch your back. Harborview woke to a salt-tinted breeze and the dull clatter of coffee cups, and Nimbus Analytics opened its doors to the weekly race for relevance. Aya Patel preferred the quiet hour before meetings, when numbers behaved and the building hadn't decided who to favor. She reviewed the customer churn model she had tuned through the weekend, the one with the steady, unfashionable logic of a good map. On the other side of the floor, Rowan Vale leaned into a cubicle partition like a gossiping lighthouse, guiding the unsure with casual brilliance and a smile that never reached his eyes. He was the favored pick for the newly announced strategy lead role, sleek, quotable, rarely caught with a spreadsheet open for longer than it took to screenshot it. The whispered email stuck under Aya's ribs, more irritating than frightening. She verified the model's assumptions, saved 3 versions to separate folders, and set up an automatic log export to a private drive. She told herself it was nothing. Mondays loved theater. Still, when the elevator chimed and director Lenora Madsen strode out, Rowan already walking at her shoulder, Aya had the sense that a curtain had risen and she hadn't been told which scene she was in. Rowan's reputation had been sanded smooth by years of strategic credit-taking. He nodded at people like a benevolent mayor of the open-plan city, picking up sentences others dropped and finishing them as though the thoughts were always his. When Lenora announced a Tuesday checkpoint on the churn initiative, Rowan suggested a lightweight pre-read, and before lunch, a deck-labeled Team Workstream summary landed in inboxes. Aya skimmed it and paused. Slide 8 reproduced her retention clusters, renamed, reorganized, and padded with buzzwords, but unmistakably hers. The footnotes described assumptions she had rejected weeks ago. She felt the old temptation: confront him publicly and look defensive, or ignore it and let truth limp after rumor. She walked to his desk. Slide 8, she said. Those cohorts are wrong. Rowan's smile was cordial, the expression of a man blessing a complaint. Our cohorts, Aya, and it's a pre-read, not a thesis, will polish for the room. Polish what's accurate, she said. Accuracy is a vibe, he replied, eyes glittering. And right now the vibe is momentum. On her way back, Aya heard him murmur to a pair of analysts, she's brilliant but caught in the weeds. The phrase glided across the desks like a branded tote. She opened version histories, noted timestamps that had shifted without her log flagging, and felt for the first time that someone had crept into the code with clean hands. Nimbus lived on dashboards. That afternoon, Aya's model began misbehaving in the staging environment. Segments reweighted themselves. A subtle off-by-1 error folded a small group into an adjacent cluster, nudging expected savings upward just enough to make ROI sparkle. To a shallow eye, the numbers looked better. To Aya, they rang like a counterfeit coin. She opened the audit table she'd set to append every query hash. A strange pattern. A midnight execution from a machine aliasing as a test rig with her credentials. IT would shrug, machine names changed often, but the IP block was wrong. Aya pinged Diego Rios in infrastructure. I need eyes on a staging call that used my token, she wrote. Diego was terse. Come by after 5. Meanwhile, Rowan practiced proximity. He lingered at Lenora's desk with quips and certainty. He asked Aya for a sanity check, which meant letting him claim consensus. She refused politely. He pivoted. Your rigor is why we're strong. His compliments were foam, pretty, dissolving on contact. At 5, Diego led her into a hum of server racks. Your token was used from a jump box that's supposed to be locked. Someone mirrored your profile, ran a scripted tweak, then killed the trail, he said. Not perfect though. He pointed at a tiny inconsistency in the environment variable. An English spelling where their configs used British. Someone thinks like a deck, not a terminal, Diego said. Not proof, but assent. The Tuesday checkpoint was glossy and fast. Rowan narrated the deck with the confidence of a weather forecaster announcing sunshine. He praised our shared effort, while implying he had coaxed clarity from unstructured talent. When questions pressed, he deflected with, we'll deep dive offline, then moved on. Aya kept her notes tight and her volume steady. She corrected a wrong assumption about customer tenure, and watched 2 managers glance at Rowan, then back at their notebooks. After the meeting, Lenora stopped Aya in the hallway. Your model anchors this. Don't let perfectionism stall momentum, she said. It sounded like support wrapped around a warning. On Slack, a thread forked where someone asked whether the clusters were too academic. Rowan replied with a gift of management speak. We're prioritizing mobilizable insight. Aya wanted to scream. Instead, she built a read-only view that displayed the true clusters and a checksum for each run. She embedded that checksum in her next email to Lenora and the CFO, framed as a hygiene update. If anyone tried to improve the numbers again, the checksum would change. The teeth she gave the pre-read were quiet ones, no snarling, just bite marks that would match later. That night another anonymous message surfaced in her inbox. He feeds on applause, stop clapping. By Thursday, the rumor arrived dressed as concern. A senior PM asked Aya if she was comfortable presenting. Another suggested she bring Rowan in case questions go strategic. A friendly analyst offered a template for less technical slides. The word abrasive floated past on a hallway breeze. Rowan excelled at this. The gentle repositioning of a woman who knew too much as someone who lacked softness. Aya recognized it and kept working. She annotated the assumptions doc, added examples, and lodged a request for a limited security audit of the model environment, narrow enough to avoid alarms, pointed enough to catch a well-intentioned saboteur. Diego DM'd. Audit approved. Minimal footprint. Meanwhile, a calendar invite popped up. Friday dry run. Organizers Rowan and Lenora. Aya accepted. Then created a silent observer, a system-level diff watcher that would record any alteration to the staging view after 6 p.m. Friday. That evening, as the building dimmed, she saw Rowan in a reflection rehearsing posture more than content. Head tilted, hands open, the stance of a savior. He looked like a person who had learned that charisma was a tool, not a trait. She looked like someone who was tired of being told to smile while fixing the engine. The dry run was a choreography of small performances. Rowan opened with a joke about Harborview's traffic, drawing a sympathetic chuckle. Aya followed with substance. Baseline churn, the bias trap they'd avoided, the uplift with confidence intervals. She invited questions. Rowan stepped into answers that didn't need him. Let me add a business lens, he'd say, then rephrase her point as though translating from a lost language. Lenora watched closely, inscrutable. We'll lock the plan this weekend, she concluded. Monday, we present to the CFO and 2 board observers. Afterward, Rowan clasped Aya's shoulder. We make a great pair, brains and storytelling, he said. She met his eyes. Both are better honest. He held her gaze a fraction too long, then smiled. At 8:11 p.m., Aya's diff watcher recorded a change. Someone nudged the segment thresholds, prettifying the forecasts again. The checksum altered. Aya took a screenshot, exported the diff, and pasted both into a locked, time-stamped PDF. She didn't email it. Not yet. If Sabotage wanted a stage, she would let it step forward under the fluorescence of Monday's meeting when the wrongness would be public, undeniable, and timed. Saturday morning, Aya visited a small cafe facing the ferry docks. She wrote names and arrows on a napkin. Access right-pointing arrow jump box, right-pointing arrow staging, right-pointing arrow checksum. She didn't want vengeance, she wanted truth, the kind that protects people who come after. Diego joined her with a paper cup and a guarded look. You're really doing this, he said. Only if it does itself, she replied. They set up a watch job that would record not only changes but the user-agent string. If the saboteur used a wrapper, the agent might leak a clue. They also prepared a decoy errors table with a signature index. A honey trap that only a meddler would touch. What if you're wrong? Diego asked. I considered it. Then I'll have more safeguards than paranoia. Across town, Rowan attended a charity brunch, posted a photo with a rental greyhound, and polished his narrative. Over the weekend, he was refining for clarity. He emailed Lenora as simplified vision. It read like a manifesto for leadership, starring himself as the benevolent explainer, grateful for the technical excellence of my colleague. On Sunday night, Aya's watch job pinged. The decoy errors table had been queried at 11:42 p.m. The index touched, then the session ended. The agent string contained one betraying word, keynote. Monday began with the hush of glass. In a smaller room before the CFO session, Lenora convened the core team. We're aligned, yes, she asked. Rowan took the cue. I streamlined the thresholds to highlight actionable pockets. Same spirit, fewer footnotes. Aya spoke carefully. The thresholds were changed Friday night. That alters confidence, not just presentation. Rowan's eyebrows lifted in mild surprise. We mustn't fetishize purity. Executives need clarity. Executives need accuracy, Aya said, keeping her voice level. Lenora's gaze swung between them. We'll show the board version, Rowan said, sliding a tablet toward her. Aya watched Lenora scan bright charts that promised tidy impact. Looks crisp, Lenora murmured. Aya decided. There's a checksum embedded in the numbers. Any alteration breaks it. She set her laptop down and showed the run history. Version, #timestamp. Friday's run doesn't match Monday's deck. Rowan's tone was indulgent. Checksum? Aya, you're making this sound like espionage. I'd prefer it wasn't, she said. We can run it live, Diego offered from the doorway, unexpected and welcome. Lenora hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes, she said. If the checksum matters, it will hold. If not, we're not derailing clarity. Rowan smiled like a man secure in a magician's secret. Diego connected a secure cable and opened the staging console. Then Aya executed the model. The checksum appeared, alphanumeric and indifferent. She opened the deck Rowan had circulated and compared it. They didn't match. The room shifted, subtle but real. Rowan recovered first. Staging drift, he said. We've all seen it. Diego shook his head. We pinned it. Also the decoy table was touched. He emphasized the last word. Someone tested an index that only exists to catch meddling. Silence. Lenora's eyes narrowed. By whom? Diego displayed the audit. Time machine ID, user token likeness, and the user agent string. Lenora read aloud. Keynote? She knew, as everyone did, that Rowan evangelized Keynote in a PowerPoint company. Rowan's laugh was too quick. Half the company uses it. Not our team, said Diego. And the jump box is restricted. Rowan adopted hurt. We're turning an optimization into a witch hunt. Aya kept her tone even. No hunt, just reconciling numbers before we face the board. Lenora's posture straightened. We will present the live hashed run. And after, we'll conduct a formal review. Rowan nodded, graceful in apparent defeat, but Aya saw his jaw flex. He had been pushed and he did not like the hand. The board observers didn't smile. The CFO did not laugh at traffic jokes. Aya presented the model with crisp restraint, opening with the checksum and why it mattered. She explained why confidence beats charisma when forecasting retention. Questions came fast. Answers were numbers, not adjectives. Rowan added occasional business lens comments that landed with a clink instead of a bell. When the session ended, the CFO said, "Proceed with the hashed thresholds. We'll evaluate impact in 4 weeks." No one applauded. Outside, in the corridor's aquarium light, Rowan leaned in. "You embarrassed me." Aya shook her head. "You selected that. You're not a leader," he hissed, very quiet. "You're a librarian with a vendetta." She stepped back. "I'm a mirror." He smirked. "Mirrors can be smashed." He walked away toward HR like a man heading to file a story before anyone else could write it, and for a breath Aya worried that his speed would win again. Then Diego texted, "Check your inbox in 10. She did. The security audit had blossomed into an incident ticket, and the compliance officer, Marisol Grant, had been looped in. "Please join me at 2 p.m., the message read. Somewhere between a request and a summons, it felt like gravity. Marisol's office was colder than the rest of the floor, or maybe she brought the temperature down by nature. She didn't waste words. "Explain the checksum," she said. Aya did, careful, patient, neutral. She explained the decoy index, the mirrored token, the jump box, and the keynote agent string. Marisol nodded once. "Do you believe Mr. Vale intentionally altered your work?" Aya paused. "I believe the deck presents altered thresholds with my name attached. Did you confront him?" I raised the discrepancy. "He claims you're trying to undermine him because of the promotion." Aya blinked. "I'm trying to protect the truth." Marisol looked at Diego. "Can you produce a timeline that would satisfy an external auditor?" "Yes," Diego said. "We designed for that." Marisol folded her hands. "Then do so." She turned to Aya. "I need your authorization to pull your private drive metadata where the PDFs live." The room was silent except for a distant printer. "Authorize it," Aya said. Marisol's focus remained clinical, but there was a glint, appreciation for someone who understood process not as a cage but as a weapon. "We will keep this contained until verified," she said. "The worst thing a company can do with a snake is pretend it's a necklace." Rowan moved fast. Before the day ended, he scheduled a team culture reset for Tuesday and circulated a note about restoring trust after misunderstandings. He met with Lenora privately, emerging with a face of controlled dismay. Word drifted that he had endured targeted hostility. 2 analysts admitted he had encouraged them to speak up about Aya's communication style. The narrative engine roared, yet stories are flimsy without nails. Marisol's audit produced nails. A list of access anomalies aligned with Rowan's late-night activity, screenshots of thresholds pre- and post-alteration, and the decoy index hit. There was also a small, devastating detail. A cloud storage sync artifact from a personal folder named Keynote Exports, time-stamped minutes after the staging change. "Not dispositive alone," Marisol cautioned, "but the mosaic is forming." Lenora read the interim report in a tight-lipped silence. "We'll do this by the book," she said. "And we will not announce until we have to," Rowan pinged Aya. "We need to talk, off the record," she declined. "On the record or not at all," he sent a single reply. "You'll regret making an enemy." She closed the chat, then opened the churn dashboard and scheduled the first production run. Work, she thought, is still how I speak. The culture reset became a town hall. Rowan opened with a confession of misalignment and an invitation to choose grace over gotcha. He described sleepless nights spent worrying about data perfectionism blocking real-world action. He invoked psychological safety, while implying he had not received it. People shifted in their chairs. The theater was good, and he was fluent. Marisol raised a hand from the back. For the sake of accuracy, she said, we are conducting a review of access to the churn model. It would be inappropriate to discuss ongoing findings here. The room tightened. Rowan faltered, then recovered. Exactly why we must focus on culture, not blame. Lenora took the mic. We'll indulge no speculation. Continue your work. She ended the meeting early. Hallway chatter heated and then, like a kettle removed from flame, cooled. The company had been given a container for its anxiety process. At 4 p.m., Marisol sent Rowan a formal request to attend a meeting at 9 a.m. Wednesday with HR and legal. He replied, of course. He wore humility like a blazer. It fit, but the shoulders didn't quite align. That evening, Aya received a calendar invite she hadn't expected. Lunch with the CFO on Thursday. No agenda. Diego whistled. They noticed the mirror, he said. Or the teeth. Aya tried not to hope. Promotions, she had learned, were weather. They blew in from regions you didn't influence. She focused on the launch. The first production run returned modest uplift exactly as predicted. No fireworks, just proof. She wrote the summary note, referenced the checksum, linked the repository, and kept the language plain. Meanwhile, Rowan drafted a letter to himself explaining the betrayal he felt. He would read it in front of HR if necessary, eyes shining in righteous pain. He rehearsed in the bathroom mirror. I championed her. I protected her from herself. He believed performances became reality if repeated in enough rooms. He was half right. Performances do become reality, until the room changes shape, and Wednesday's room would not be a place for applause. The meeting began with pleasantries and ended with stillness. Marisol laid out the timeline, the audit artifacts, and the policy clauses Rowan had agreed to upon joining. HR asked him to explain the threshold changes and the access path. He described routine caretaking and formatting, then suggested Diego had a personal issue with him. Diego, who rarely spoke in such sessions, said simply, I prefer servers to people. The joke didn't land. Legal asked Rowan to unlock his laptop for a supervised review. He resisted, then relented, then claimed forgotten passwords, then remembered. The reviewers found the Keynote exports folder. They found a script a contractor had written months prior, refashioned to touch the staging view. They found an email draft never sent, in which he lamented that the numbers are so much better my way. HR closed their notebooks. We'll pause your access while we complete review, they said. Silence sat in the room like a witness. On the way out, Rowan looked at Aya with a blaze of disbelief. Snakes do not expect the floor to turn solid under other people's feet and quicksand under theirs. Rumors once loyal to Rowan turned faithless. Analysts who had nodded at his jokes now recalled odd requests. A PM remembered he'd asked for editable copies of Aya's sheets for formatting. Someone else found he'd created a shadow Slack channel called Exec Polish where he crowdsourced charisma, not truth. Lenora visited Aya's desk. You held your ground, she said, not smiling. We value that. It was not an apology, but it was a building turning a little in her direction. The production dashboard hummed along, incrementally improving churn. Numbers were boring. They were wonderful. Rowan, suspended from systems, wandered the perimeter of his influence and found the fences higher than he'd thought. He scheduled time with a board observer. The invite was declined. He wrote a long medium draft about misunderstood leadership, then left it in drafts. At 5:32 p.m., HR sent a message to a small group. The investigation had concluded. Policy violations had been confirmed. Grounds for termination were satisfied. A separate email prepared by legal waited for signatures. The machine that had once carried Rowan forward with greased ease now clicked through steps he could not slow. Thursday morning, HR asked Rowan to step into a room with frosted glass and neutral art. He emerged 20 minutes later with a sealed envelope and a face like winter sunlight. Bright, brittle, and not warm, he walked to his desk. People pretended to focus. He packed slowly, performing unbothered efficiency. When his badge failed at the elevator, a security guard pressed the down button for him. And even that mercy felt like a stage direction. A message went company-wide at 11:04 a.m. Rowan Vale has departed Nimbus Analytics. We thank him for his contributions and wish him well. No details, because institutions prefer passive voice when recounting active harm. Slack filled with ellipses. Aya's phone buzzed with a single text from an unknown number. You weren't supposed to win. She deleted it. In the quiet after noise, she exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Not triumph. Relief. Relief at the floor being level again, at numbers that didn't lie for applause, at the space between doing your job well and being punished for it shrinking back to a survivable width. The CFO's lunch was not celebratory. It was practical. We'll keep the checksum protocol, she said. We'll budget for tooling to make it standard. She asked Aya what resources she needed, and Aya surprised herself by asking not for headcount but for documentation time. Good math is only useful when the next person can trust it, she said. The CFO nodded. That's leadership, a sentence like a rung on a ladder. Back at her desk, Aya found a note from Lenora inviting her to apply formally for strategy lead. She stared at it, wondering if she wanted the role that had poisoned someone else. She didn't want someone else's throne. She wanted a table where arguments were about truth instead of shine. She drafted her application anyway, writing about culture in terms of reproducibility, about mentorship as a long math problem with human variables. She pressed send and felt no fireworks, just a small, steady warmth. Rowan's departure sent echoes beyond the building. Recruiters who had once forwarded his profile now found a compliance note attached. The market is gossipy. It remembers in bullet points. He took interviews where he presented himself as a casualty of politics. Some people believed him briefly. Others asked about thresholds and checksums. He fumbled. The polished narrative dulled without a chorus. He would land somewhere, eventually, maybe at a firm that liked sparkle more than substance. Karma isn't magic, it's math over time. Back at Nimbus, the churn program reported its first 4-week readout. The lift was real, not heroic. Real was enough. Aya presented the results to the same board observers who hadn't smiled before. They didn't smile now either. They asked precise questions and took precise notes. When she finished, one of them said, "Thank you for insisting on a system that resists wishful thinking." It was the closest thing to praise she needed. She made eye contact with Diego by the door and tilted her chin, a quiet nod between people who prefer servers to people but will show up for people when it counts. A week later, Lenora announced Aya as interim strategy lead. There were congratulations, awkward and genuine. Aya stood by the big window and looked out at Harborview's harbor, ferries moving on a schedule nobody applauded doing their work. She drafted her team's first principle: we will make truth easy to find and hard to alter. Then she wrote the second: we will argue like people who expect to work together tomorrow. In the evening, she took the long way home, walking past cafes where strangers talked about weather and football and not about promotions. The weight on her shoulders felt different, not lighter exactly. Right-sized, she thought of the email that had started it, watch your back, and smiled, because the better advice had turned out to be watch your work. The world had not become fairer. She had only helped one small corner of it operate as if fairness were the default. That would have to do, for now. If you enjoyed this story and want more slow-burn tales where truth stands up to shine, subscribe, so you don't miss the next twist, the next quiet trap, or the next small victory that feels for a moment like justice.